Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jeff Jones. I'm the Director of Sports and Recreation for BlazeSports America. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar. Our webinar today is an introduction to creating accessible sports, fitness, and physical activity environments. This webinar was made possible with generous support from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It is my pleasure to introduce my co-worker, Ann Kenty, as one of today's speakers.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Jeff.
Ann has had 2 decades of working with disability sports, 10 years of federal policy arena. She's a 3-time Paralympian and is a member of the International Paralympic Governing Board. It is also my pleasure to join Ann as the second speaker today. I've enjoyed a long career in disability sports, including the managing and designing of the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago's Center for Health and Fitness. We have a number of objectives today. By the end of the webinar, we hope that participants will have a better understanding of the benefits of physical activity for individuals with disabilities, the new ADA regulations that pertain to fitness facilities, the ways fitness centers and exercise programs can be made more accessible to individuals with physical disabilities, the types of adaptive equipment that are available, and the technical assistance resources that are available. And again, it is my pleasure to introduce Ann as our first speaker today.
Thanks again, Jeff, and good afternoon, everyone. We are so pleased to be hosting a webinar on the topic of physical activity and individuals with disabilities. As many of you know, people with disabilities are not immune to obesity and overweight. In fact, we are overweight and obese at significantly higher rates than the general population. And complications from overweight and obesity impact our health and mobility much sooner and can have a profound impact on our ability to work, engage in the community, and prevent secondary conditions. And currently, our nation is facing an obesity epidemic. We know that nearly 1/3 of American adults are obese. And as I mentioned, adults with disabilities struggle significantly with overweight and obesity issues. And we also report much higher rates of inactivity. Childhood obesity is also significantly higher among children and youth with disabilities at 17.5%. And we're all quite familiar with the complications that come from overweight and obesity in terms of the secondary health conditions. So it's really important that all Americans, and particularly Americans with disabilities, have access to physical activity opportunities in their communities. In terms of the population of Americans with disabilities, we know that there are 54 million Americans with some type of disability and 34 million with a severe disability. And research tells us that physical activity can help reduce the secondary health conditions related to disability. And now I'd like to talk to you about 2 areas that we're going to discuss today that are going to help address the physical inactivity, the overweight and obesity rates among people with disabilities. And the first is the physical activity guidelines. In 2008, the federal government released the first comprehensive guidelines on physical activity ever issued. And these guidelines included recommendations for children and adults with disabilities. The guidelines are based on the report submitted by the Physical Activity Guidelines Advisory Committee, comprised of a group of 13 leading experts in the field of exercise science and public health. Now, the guidelines specifically recommend for adults with disabilities that we get 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise each week. And the guidelines also recommend that adults with disabilities get 2 or more days a week of moderate to high intensity muscle strengthening exercise. Now for children and adolescents with disabilities, the guidelines recommend 60 minutes of physical activity per day. And much of the 60 minutes should be moderate to vigorous aerobic physical activity. And 3 times a week, children should engage in vigorous physical activity. Additionally, children and adolescents with disabilities should include muscle and bone strengthening physical activity at least 3 days a week. Now, the guidelines also suggest that individuals with disabilities who are not able to meet the guidelines that I just went over should engage in regular physical activity according to their ability and should avoid inactivity as much as possible. And we would also like to recommend, as the guidelines do, that all individuals should consult your healthcare provider about the amounts and types of physical activity that are appropriate for your ability. Now, we also know that there are a number of barriers to being physically active for individuals with disabilities. One is the lack of access to fitness or physical activity programs and facilities, and also the lack of trained personnel in these facilities to be able to guide a person who may be new to physical activity and exercise, or as a newly disabled person may not know exactly where to start. So today we're going to talk about these areas, and in particular what I'm going to do next is talk about the new ADA guidelines and the fact that they're seeking to reduce barriers to recreation and fitness facilities so that more people with disabilities can participate in these programs in the community. Well, last September, the U.S. Department of Justice published its revised ADA regulations, and this includes its ADA standards for accessible design. The regulations and design standards for recreation facilities were included in these revisions and have been under development for many years. In fact, some of you on the phone may have been involved in the development of the recreation facilities guidelines. An entire chapter in the ADA Standards for Design guidelines is dedicated to recreation facilities. I'm not going to go over all of the recreational areas that are covered, and I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail on this. But what I do want to do is provide you with an overview of the new requirements as they pertain to recreation facilities that may be used for physical activity related purposes. So if we could go to the next slide, thanks. So today, Jeff Jones is going to cover in greater detail in his section the requirements under fitness equipment. And the new regulations cover accessible routes and clear floor space so that people with mobility-related disabilities can access fitness equipment easily and safely within a gym or fitness center environment. We have much more information on that, as I mentioned. The second facility on the list is swimming pools. I'm going to give you some general information about the changes here as they relate to accessible entry and exit into pools. And then I also want to touch briefly on children's play areas so that those of you who have children's play areas or who are working with children with and without disabilities can have a general idea of what the requirements are for newly constructed or renovated facilities. I've also listed boating facilities on the list, and for those of you who may do, watercraft-related activities. But I'm just going to give you very basic information. Actually, the information primarily is in the handout that you'll be getting after the presentation. I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that marinas with boat slips and boating piers, as well as boat launching ramps and gangways, have some accessibility specifications now to ensure that those of us who want to access the water safely and frequently can do so using these facilities with some features that allow us to do that. The next area, if we could go to the next slide, is golf facilities. This is very exciting for many people who enjoy the sport and the activity of golf. And so I'm just going to give you a little bit of information. Again, the regulations and the standards give you much more detail. If you happen to be responsible for a golf facility, you'll want to consult the information in much more detail. But the exciting thing is that golf courses will be required to be designed so that golf cars have accessible routes that connect the individuals with disabilities driving them to all of the elements within the golf course, including obviously the golf holes. Also just wanted to mention saunas and steam rooms, which are frequently found in fitness facilities and recreation facilities. They're now going to be required to be accessible. And there are accessibility specifications for those if you happen to be responsible for such a facility. Another area that we just wanted to mention, and again we have more information in the handouts about this and much more information about resources you can go to for more information, but there have been revisions to regulations regarding service animals and also the definition of wheelchairs and personal mobility devices. There's been a change in the height of counters and anything that requires a reach range for someone sitting in a wheelchair or seated, and also automated telephone systems. And we mention those because they're related to the services and areas that people will be using if they're using your facilities for physical activity. So now the slide you see in front of you is the swimming pool's entry and exit systems. Any newly constructed or renovated swimming pools are going to be required to have at least 2 accessible entrances and exits. The first being either a pool lift or a sloped entry, and then the second being either a transfer wall or pool stairs. So what you see here is a diagram of those 4 areas. The first diagram is the pool stairs, and as you'll see, well, there are specifications for the stairs, how wide they must be, and then each of the stairs must have a grab bar, either an individual grab bar or a continuous grab bar, so a person with a mobility-related disability can bump down the stairs independently. The second diagram is the transfer wall, and where you see the word pool deck is where a person in a wheelchair would pull up next to the transfer wall. And if you're looking at this, you can see to the right of the transfer wall is the pool itself. So there are obviously very specific design elements required to build a transfer wall into a pool. But I just wanted to give you a general idea of what that looks like. And then you'll see on top of the transfer wall is a grab bar as well to enable a person to transfer from their wheelchair to the transfer wall and then down into the water, and when they're ready, back from the water back up onto the transfer wall. The third diagram is the pool lift. And the pool lift is mounted onto the pool deck, and it's operated hydraulically. And you need to have clear space next to the chair that's mounted to the pool lift so that a person in a wheelchair or with a mobility aid can pull up and transfer to the chair. And then the chair will swing out over the water and be lowered down into the water. The fourth diagram is the sloped entry access to a pool. And this would be used by people who are ambulatory, who may need grab bars to walk down into the water, and also wheelchair users. And obviously it's important to have an aquatic, safe wheelchair or wheeled device, and so that people don't use their everyday chair because it would get damaged going in and out of the water. But that's what a sloped entry looks like. also just want to mention that wading pools are now covered under the ADA, under these new guidelines, and wading pools must have a sloped entry in order to provide access. And also, many pool facilities also have spas, and so spas must be made accessible by a pool lift or a transfer wall. And then I just wanted to mention wave pools and leisure rivers and those types of water elements also need to have one accessible means of entry, either a pool lift, a sloped entry, or a transfer system. Okay, we can go on to the play areas. A variety of children's play areas are covered, including those in parks, schools, child care facilities, and shopping centers. And even if you think about parks, water play components of children's play areas in parks are covered. And the Department of Justice advises that aquatic wheelchairs be provided in those cases, much like I was just talking about with the sloped entry into pools. Now, play areas must have ramps connecting ground level play components. If there are, if there's a rise to the ground level play components from the ground, and those ramps can be no steeper than the ratio of 1 to 16, and the rise should be no higher than 12 inches. And also, transfer systems must be provided so that young children with disabilities using mobility aids can transfer to a transfer support and bump up to the elevated play areas. If you can imagine a child's play area, there's often multiple levels. And then it's also important for the transfer platforms to be not located too far away from the other elevated play areas. So the designers will need to pay attention to this, just to make sure that children with disabilities can move around the play components safely and easily, and it takes quite a bit of an exertion. So designers are going to want to pay attention to that. But all those details are provided in the regs and in the standards for accessible design guidelines. Okay, next. Golf facilities. Well, I mentioned earlier that accessible routes for golf cars must be provided. So golf cars must, be able to access the rental area, the bag drop-off area, and areas outside the boundary of the golf course. It's also required that 1 or 2 teeing grounds per hole be accessible, and if there are weather shelters provided, then a golf cart must be able to enter and exit those shelters as well. And then there are also specifications for the practice putting greens, the practice teeing grounds, and the teeing stations at driving ranges to ensure that they're designed so a golf cart can enter and exit these practice putting greens and putting areas. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so the new regulations timelines. As I mentioned, the regulations were published in September of last year. They were actually signed by the Attorney General in July of last year, around the 20th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And just last week, the new regulations became effective. Now, the compliance with the new regulations and standards becomes mandatory in March 15th of 2012. So right now we're kind of in a transition period of sorts. If facilities are in the middle of completing construction or renovation on any of these facilities, or will have those completed before March 15th of 2012, then they have some options in terms of which regulations they're going to be using to guide their accessibility features. But as of March 15th, 2012, these new standards become mandatory. Now, I know I provided this overview of the new ADA regulations and standards as a means to inform all of you of the changes generally affecting recreation facilities used for fitness and physical activities. The information presented should definitely not be used to guide facilities modifications or construction. I highly recommend that each of you thoroughly review the new regulations and design standards. And also, if you have questions or want to understand the timelines related to your specific renovations or plans, or also any questions about specifications for designing accessibility features, that you consult the U.S. Department of Justice. They have an ADA website that has the most current information available, and they also have an ADA hotline where you can call and talk to a live person, and they can answer your questions. And also the U.S. Access Board is another resource for more detailed information and more detailed questions. And so the contact information for these resources is provided in today's handout material. And now I'd like to turn it back over to Jeff, who's going to present 10 ways to make your fitness facility accessible to people with disabilities.
Thank you, Ann. We are looking at the top 10 ways to improve access in fitness centers. Most of these do not relate to the new regulations. We think they're a way to enhance overall access, and that's what we're hoping for. And we assume that everyone's in favor of that. So starting at number 10 is researching existing programs. Number 9, accessories. Number 8, treadmills. 7, recumbent bikes. Number 6, ergometers. Number 5, weight equipment. Number 4, floor spacing, which is the meat of the regulations. Number 3, staff training. Number 2, accessibility assessments. And number 1, BlazeSports America. This material we're going to go through pretty quick. It is all referenced in the handout that you get. So like I said, we're on time factor here. We're just going to buzz right along. Number 10, researching existing programs. There is an enormous number of great facilities out there that service people with disabilities, from community colleges to major universities to YMCAs. We provide a 2-page list. It's certainly not all the programs in the country. It's just a sampling of the programs. We have found that people are more than willing to share information, provide site visits, and give you information about their equipment and what works and what doesn't work. And so it's up to you to search out something near you if you're looking to do some research. Like I said, I think you'll find that people are more than willing to share information. And speaking of that, we have a special guest speaker that Ann's going to introduce.
Thanks, Jeff. As a national organization with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Communities Putting Prevention to Work initiative, BlazeSports has had the opportunity to work with several entities in Maine, including the Wyndham Raymond Schools, and to ensure students with disabilities are included in physical activity programs. And we were delighted to learn that Wyndham Raymond Schools already had established a Center for Motivational Wellness with inclusive fitness equipment and inclusion in mind. And we're pleased to have Stephanie Joyce, the school health coordinator with Wyndham Raymond Schools, with us today. Stephanie's going to tell us about the inclusive features of the Center for Motivational Wellness and what led them to design their center and programs in this way. Stephanie?
Thanks, Ann. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
So first I'd like to share my personal experience that has made me passionate about this work. I have a 16-year-old sister with Down syndrome who struggles to participate in many of the same activities as her peers. She's in a small rural school district, and like many similarly sized schools, they have a very small percentage of students with abilities that are similar to hers. She does receive adaptive PE, but there are no extracurricular physical activity opportunities for her that are non-competitive and that accommodate her needs. So this year, she joined the field hockey team, which has been really great for her socially, but she's joined the team as the water girl, which is a very different experience than participating in the sport itself along with her team. So this is just one example why it's extremely important to include students that are differently abled in all of our physical activity opportunities. So as Ann mentioned, I work for Wyndham Raymond Schools. We're a rural community just outside of Portland. And about a year ago, we received a Carol M. White Physical Education Program grant. This is a nearly $1 million federal grant that allowed us to create these centers of wellness in our schools. The one center that I do want to direct your attention to is the Center for Motivational Wellness at the Wyndham Middle School. This center is a fitness arcade that incorporates gaming technology into physical activity. We can go to the next slide. We purchased a UBE hand bike that is placed next to stationary bikes and treadmills for students that are in wheelchairs or that have limited use of their lower body. We also purchased a Hand Dance Pro, if we can go to the next slide, which you can see is basically a board that students can set into their lap to play Dance Dance Revolution with their peers. We also got a Cybex system, which is very similar to the Wii. You can see on the next slide, but it incorporates more aerobic activity. This can be used by students that are using wheelchairs or that are in need to work on their muscle tone and coordination. We really wanted to ensure that all of our students had the opportunities to participate in activities that are similar to their peers. So although there may be a limited number of students that use this adaptive equipment year after year, it was really about being prepared for when we do have these students, no matter how infrequent that may be. So that's really one of the most important pieces that I want to emphasize here is that students want to do the same activities as their friends, and then they don't want to feel any more different than they may already feel. So we really tried to aim to not find alternative activities that were appropriate to meet their needs, but rather to find adaptive equipment that would allow these students to participate in the same activities as their peers. We're also working to revise our district school wellness policy, and we'll be including a statement about physical activity and the importance of including students with different abilities. Although at this time we have many like-minded staff members that are true advocates for students that are differently abled, including this piece in our wellness policy will hopefully make these initiatives more sustainable if these staff members are no longer with us in the future. Thank you, BlazeSports, for allowing us to share this experience.
Well, thank you, Stephanie, for joining us today and sharing that exciting information on your program. Like I said before, there is a number of programs. There's a few here that are listed that we didn't provide photos on, and again, we have a handout that includes a number more. So, like I said, reach out and find out what's happening and what's working across the country. There's a number of great programs out there. Number 9 is accessories. At this point, I have to give our general disclaimer that BlazeSports doesn't endorse any of these products. We don't work with any of these vendors or anything like that. We're presenting information basically for your information to research and find out what works best for you. There's a variety of things out there. Anyone that joins the gym knows that, especially for the weight equipment, there's a variety of attachments and things for different types of exercises. Again, for people with disabilities, some of these are difficult to use, especially for those with upper extremity difficulties and grasp difficulties. We suggest the use of activity mitts. Access to recreation can mix the ones that are on the market, and they're Velcro and provide a great deal of support in terms of holding different pieces of equipment. They come in 2 different versions, and again, it allows individuals with grasp difficulties to use both aerobic and strength equipment by providing support for gripping. A smaller version of that is a wrist cuff that goes, as you can see, right around the wrist, and it connects to usually cable-type apparatus, and is very functional and a little bit more inexpensive than the wrist, activity mitts. And here you can see them being used in a weight equipment. Some commercially made equipment also works for people with disabilities. Here, the lifting hooks are made for able-bodied weightlifters, but they also have found that people with grasp difficulties can use them to assist in their grip strength in certain apparatus. Number 8 is treadmills. Our issue in treadmills is there's a whole bunch of different treadmills out there on the market. Most people that use treadmills for a workout, the first thing they do is jump on the treadmill and push the button to increase the speed of the treadmills. For people with disabilities, that becomes a problem. Most treadmills start at 1.5 miles per hour, and for people with lower extremity disabilities, that's too fast. So we suggest that facility operators, especially in most facilities that have anywhere between 5 and maybe 20 treadmills, that they designate a couple that start at 0.5 miles an hour or less and increase at 1 mile per hour increments. That allows somebody with lower extremity disability, a stroke survivor, someone who's on a walking program, to be able to use a treadmill and have a better safety feature. This treadmill Cybex, you can see the long handrails. This also is more beneficial for people that need some stability and some support on a treadmill. And again, in a facility that has a number of treadmills, having a couple of different kinds is useful. Those many fitness facilities are connected to hospitals. Those that might consider a Gait trainer. This allows an individual with a lower extremity disability to work on their gait patterns. The panel is to the right. You can see the footprints. They actually record the footprints as the person is stepping, and allows them to have some visual feedback in terms of correcting their gait pattern. It's a little more expensive piece of equipment, but again, in a hospital-related fitness center, it's a very useful piece of equipment. Number 7, in terms of recumbent bikes, we recommend recumbent bikes just because of the support that they provide. Some people, maybe seniors and general people, just don't like the upright stationary bikes. The recumbent bikes have wider seats. They have handholds on most of them. The newer ones today even have display screens for videos and things like that. Again, much more balance for people with disabilities. You'll see this logo here, Inclusive Fitness Accreditation. We'll talk about that later, but that is a English-based system in terms of identifying equipment that meets their accessibility standards. Number 6, ergometers. We're really interested in ergometers because for people with lower extremity disabilities, that's their #1 means of cardiovascular exercise. And given the obesity issues that we're dealing with, especially with kids with spinal bifida and spinal cord injuries, upper extremity ergometers are the main source of exercise that they're going to be able to get, other than pushing their wheelchairs. And some don't have the ability to do that over a long period of time. So UBEs, or upper extremity ergometers, are the thing to do. Now, what we're presenting here is a couple of different models. You'll see that they're user-friendly to a variety of populations, ambulatory, seated, and also individuals in wheelchairs. Obviously, that's the kind that you want to look at, that can be user-friendly to a lot of different people. Saratoga Cycle is a very popular one in rehab settings. It has different handholds for different grasp abilities. It has an adjustable table to fit the height of the person. It's low maintenance, high mileage. You get a lot of wear and tear out of this machine. When possible, we suggest ergometers that also have a leg component to it, especially for those with lower extremity disabilities. Usually are passive exercise, but it does get the legs involved and gets the exercise for the lower extremities. Here you see 2 types of feet attachments, one with just the foot attachment and another with a high boot Velcro attachment. We suggest those as well, and because it provides one with a high boot provides better overall support for lower extremities, especially if someone is spinal cord injured and doesn't have a lot of muscle tone in the lower extremities. Again, the Cadillac models, if you will be the Scifit Pro II. They come in a couple different versions. This is just like a treadmill. It's variable resistance. It also goes in reverse, which is really key for shoulder development, especially for long-term wheelchair user that has shoulder issues. Being able to work in both forward and reverse mode is really significant in terms of conditioning of the shoulders. Again, you see the inclusive fitness accreditation in terms of their promotion of this piece of equipment. We included the NUSTEP in the ergometer category. It's kind of like a seating elliptical trainer, but it does include both arms and legs. It has a wide seat. It does swivel to the side for easy transfer. It is promoted primarily for seniors, but we find that it's a very good piece of equipment for people with disabilities because it does have the wide seat and includes both the legs and the arms for exercise. Weight equipment, great deal of weight equipment on the market. We're only going to show a few here. There's a number of things, single station multi-exercise equipment, circuit training piece of equipment. You also, again, in terms of using the wrist cuffs, you can use a standard piece of equipment that you see in most gyms. This is a pulley crossover a cable machine that's going to be used for a variety of different things when you're using the wrist cuff. Here's a piece of equipment in a standard gym, a single pull-down rope exercise. It just happens to be provide good accessibility for someone in a wheelchair because it's a front-loading type of machine. Cybex and another company, Pulse, we're going to talk about is really the type of equipment that we are suggesting and promoting. This is a piece of equipment that is designed to have the seat swivel to the side and allow complete access for someone in a wheelchair. So the same piece of equipment can be used with individuals in a wheelchair and individuals, ambulatory individuals not using a wheelchair. Most fitness centers these days have these single station, single exercise pieces of equipment, and especially those of you that work for park districts and are using taxpayer dollars to build your fitness centers, this is what we're recommending. It provides complete access to the exercises, and for individuals using wheelchairs, upper extremity exercises, the most important, obviously, because that's their means of mobility, and these machines provide that opportunity. Pulse is the second company. So a little less flashy, but as functional as the Cybex, and has all the different upper extremity activities. And when you're presenting it to your supervisors or the planning staff of the new facility, or if you're renovating facilities, we've done a quick cost comparison. Light Fitness piece of equipment, very, very popular in fitness centers across the country, does not have the accessible seating feature. The Cybex and the Pulse do, and you look at the prices, they are comparable, especially the Pulse to the Light Fitness. And given the cost of fitness facilities, we don't think the increase in cost is preventive in terms of having this type of equipment in your facilities. Number 4 is floor spacing, and actually is the meat of the new regulations. Regulation 1004 specifically says that exercise machines and equipment shall have a clear floor space complying with 305 position for transfer or for use for individuals seated in a wheelchair. Clear floors or ground space is required at exercise machines, and equipment shall be permitted to overlap. 305 actually refers to a second regulation, and that if you go to that section, and that's where you can get the standards, and we provide that information in the handout. Section 305 does specifically point out the amount of room that you need in terms of floor spacing, and a clear floor space of 48 inches by 30 inches, depending on the orientation that you have to have. Certain machines, obviously, the orientation of the wheelchair is different from either from the front or to the side, based on if their transfer is needed or not needed. So the floor space is the key aspect of this regulation. We're suggesting a very good resource, removing barriers to health clubs and fitness facilities, designed by the North Carolina Office on Disability and Health. Is a free download if you go to the website, which is listed there, and it has a great manual that looks at the different parts of the fitness center in terms of spacing of equipment and access for individuals with wheelchairs and disabilities, and a very comprehensive manual and a great free resource. We want to point out here that it's a picture of Rehab Institute of Chicago's Center for Health and Fitness in terms of the spacing that they had. They were challenged by a facility that had a lot of columns, white columns, and they had to fit equipment around it. And they've done a number of things to provide access to the equipment. One thing we'll say is the black pads that are under the equipment are not only to protect the floor, but also as a tactile situation for visually impaired. When we developed the fitness center, it was primarily for people, we thought primarily for people with physical disabilities, and as it turned out, when the word got out about our center within the visually impaired and blind community, we had an overwhelming response from visually impaired and blind, and had a large population of visually impaired and blind participants in our program, over 100, and they were more of the steady users than any other group of people we had in the center. So we had to design things working with the local blind organizations to help facilitate opportunities for visually impaired, and the mats are one of the ideas because that was a change in texture of the floor that individuals could tell that a piece of equipment was there. We also did little things like on the control panels for treadmills and ergometers, we put raised dots, sticky raised dots to the arrow, so individuals with visual impairments or blind could feel where the arrows were, so they could increase or decrease the speed of equipment. So we suggest reaching out to disability-specific organizations in your community to help you orientate your facility to certain populations that might be using them. Here again, the Center for Health and Fitness, you see two pieces of machines, actually 4 machines there, 2 people using it, plenty of floor space in front for access and traffic when people are participating in activities. And also in terms of transferring here to NUSTEPs, and plenty of room for a wheelchair to come up within the 48-inch specs and be able to provide transfer. This is a health club that I belong to that they involuntarily provided opportunity for me to take some pictures. But you can see that the floor space here is pretty ample. There's a wide path between the rows of machines, plenty of access for wheelchairs to go both ways on it. If you look at the spacing between each of the pieces of equipment, there also is plenty of space. The unfortunate part about it is these individual weight machines are not wheelchair accessible. The seats do not swivel out of the way. The cost, again, for a commercial place to have accessible equipment would be comparable. For an individual in a wheelchair doing a general exercise program of 8 to 10 upper extremity exercises in a particular workout, you're talking about 16 to 20 transfers on top of what they're doing for a workout. So the use of accessible equipment is highly recommended, not only to prevent the wear and tear on people's shoulders for transfer, but to allow opportunities for people who can't transfer. And this facility would be only appropriate for those who do have the ability to transfer out of a wheelchair. The second part of the regulation talks about having at least one of each type of equipment must be on an accessible route within the facility and must have the clear floor space that we talked about. This facility, all their aerobic, or I should say most of their aerobic equipment was on the second floor and there was no elevator. But in meeting the specifications, they do provide one of each piece of equipment on the first floor, which is accessible to all participants. The problem is, as you look at it here, the spacing of these equipment does not facilitate use for individuals with wheelchairs. So they have to look at, although they have plenty of room on this first floor, a little better spacing of their individual equipment. Staff training, number 3. There's a great deal of information. We've already talked about the new ADA regulations on the U.S. Access Board website, and the web address is there. This is all part of the handouts that we provide you. We're just going to quickly go over things. They have a great opportunity also in terms of webinars. They have a number of webinars already scheduled, including one on August 4th, Accessible Health Clubs and Fitness Facilities, which is very similar to our topic today. They also have archived webinars, including accessible swim pools and spas, all to your availability 24/7. And again, the website is there, and this information is in our handout as well. There are a number of great textbooks out there that go over exercise for people with disabilities. There's a great opportunity if you have, especially if you have staff that know their business, know fitness and exercise, but may not be familiar with disabilities. These texts are great general information in terms of disability issues. There's also some that are very specific to exercise with disability. Again, great references for staff to become familiar with issues related to different disabilities. And obviously the main factor nationally in the National Strength and Conditioning Association in terms of certification of weight training staff. We also are providing some information, contact information on a number of disability-specific organizations that have also designed their own fitness information and exercise information that are specific to a particular disability. And those resources and connections are part of our handout as well. The Center for Universal Design is looking at universal design for everything, all aspects of life, and they do address issues related to accessibility and fitness as well. A great general resource that staff should be familiar with. Another website, Beneficial Designs. You see in the red there, Universal Design Guidelines for Fitness Equipment, has some theoretical-based information related to why fitness equipment and facilities should be accessible, and some thoughts on that. Some great information to have staff be familiar with. We've shown this logo a couple times already today, the Inclusive Fitness Initiative. This is an England-based operation that promotes accessible fitness in different facilities across England, and they actually have gone to the step to certify equipment, and so facility operators can go to their website and find out what is recommended to provide the best opportunity for accessible equipment and fitness, and then have a direct resource for that. In the United States, kind of a sister organization is the Inclusive Fitness Coalition. They have not got to the part of endorsing equipment or recognizing equipment for their accessibility, but it's a great website and a great resource for staff and participants alike. The American College of Sports Medicine is another organization that's been involved with fitness for a long, long time. They have joined in with the National Center on Physical Activity and Disability to design a certification inclusive fitness trainer certification, and the information is on their website. It is for fitness staff that are already certified, and it's very comprehensive, but it deals specifically with issues related to exercise and individuals with physical disabilities. So if you have specific fitness staff, this is a great opportunity for them to increase their knowledge and get certified in the area of fitness for people with disabilities.
And all disabilities, not just physical disabilities.
Correct.
Yep.
Thank you, Ann.
Yep.
The National Center on Physical Activity and Disability, NCPAD, is an organization that I was fortunate enough to be involved with in terms of the beginning of the organization, and they have a great website, an unbelievable amount of information. You could have a webinar just alone on NCPAD and the information they have. What we pointed out today is that they have a great series of exercise videos available and pocket exercise guides related to certain disabilities. The ones shown here are spinal cord injured for paraplegics and quadriplegics and stroke survivors. They also have one for spina bifida. A great series of information and a great orientation to staff that don't know disability and want to see it actively involved in exercise opportunities. And finally, under staff training, is BlazeSports provides a certification program in disability sports certification, and that information is going to be on our website soon. We are in the midst of designing a brand new website, so some of the pages are not up to speed yet, but our certification one will have the information there related to disability sports certification and what is involved in that. So we wanted to point that out as a final part of our staff training. Number 2 is accessibility assessments, and we found that the ADA regulations and the ongoing updating of those regulations create the need for assessment of existing facilities, because things change, and as you know, the new specs are there, and it's important for staff and facility operators to know where their facilities stand in terms of current regulations, and there's a number of opportunities for that to happen. Department of Justice ADA checklist, and an aim-free assessment we'll talk about, and then BlazeSports has developed an accessible trails checklist that we'll talk about. The Department of Justice has, again, a checklist for existing facilities. It is a 15-page or so, very simple question and answer. You go through and you read the question and relate to a particular part of the facility, and your answer is simply yes or no. And if it's no, then they provide possible solutions to remedy that situation. And it goes, it's a very simple thing. Certain areas include measurements, and they provide an opportunity place to put the measurement and how to deal with situations if you don't quite make the measurements. Great. Again, simple 15-page resource that's a free download, and the information there is on the website, and our handout will give you that information. NCPAD, we talked about earlier, designed an accessible instrument measuring fitness and recreation environments, or AIM-free. There's a couple of different versions of AIM-free, one for fitness centers, one for pools, and one for fitness centers and pools. And there's also a version, a consumer version, where participants could fill it out and get a participant view of things, and then also a professional version where staff would fill it out as well. Very comprehensive. We don't have the time to go into it, but basically the gist of it is you look at a facility, here's a before situation of a fitness facility and all the different things that you could look at in terms of accessibility and user-friendliness. It's not just getting in the door or getting accessibility to the bathrooms. It's all different things related that present a user-friendly atmosphere, a universal design, if you will, for a particular facility. And then the suggestions in terms of how to improve not only floor space but flow, access for people with wheelchairs, certain things that you see here, additions of chairs for people who might not be in great shape and need to have a rest, different types of, in terms of the countertops and things like that. So a lot of different things that go into the aim-free assessment. Great opportunity. It doesn't take experts to come in and do it. It can be done by you, your staff, and participants of your program. Okay, and we hope that BlazeSports would be the #1 way for you to help keep your facilities accessible. As I mentioned earlier, we have a brand new website. It is a website in development. Timing is always a bear, but we are working very hard to put as many resources on this website as possible. You'll find that the handout for this has already been posted, not the webinar itself, but the supplemental handout that we talked about, 20-page handout. We have a number of other resources available. Stephanie earlier talked about her wellness policy. We have a suggested school wellness policy already listed here. We have issues in terms of great staff training and things in terms of etiquette and how to address people with disabilities. I talked about the facility access to trails checklist. We've developed a trails checklist in terms of outdoor facilities and trails within your communities, and then a handout on adapting physical education and adaptive physical programs. So again, our website is growing. So as you return to it frequently, hopefully that you'll see that our resources posted are going to be much greater. In addition, we have a great page that includes a variety of information related to starting a program. We have information related to the administrative materials necessary, anything from volunteer recruitment forms to check request forms, the whole 9 yards. We also have a series of sports manuals on specific topics and some distant learning presentations that connect to you, and also coaching videos related to specific things. So real hardcore information that your staff can become familiar with a variety of different activities, and all of our webinars are posted there, and a variety of other things. It's a great resource that you should frequent. Again, under on the tab on our front page, you'll see Blaze TV. That'll take you to a variety of resources that are listed in terms of our presentations and videos related to a variety of things that we participate in, including our international initiative. Again, a list of a variety of things, in coaching wheelchair tennis and coaching swimming, coaching track and field, coaching wheelchair rugby with some national experts that have developed these. You can see the viewer list. They get regular attendance and are used very frequently by people across the country and actually across the world in terms of the different things that are available. We also want to make you understand that we have one of my jobs here at BlazeSports is real-time technical assistance, that if you have a question related to accessibility in terms of equipment, in terms of developing a program, in terms of certain disability, whatever, that part of my role here is to provide that technical assistance, and you can contact me at either phone or my email that is listed there, and we're happy to help you any way we can in the future. Also, our policy assistance department, our Washington office, is staffed with 3 dynamic individuals, Ann Cody and Leah Howard, and Chen King Bang. He's not, we don't have him listed here, but he's a third staff that just joined. But they do outstanding work, and I'll let Ann jump in here and tell you what kind of outstanding work that they can provide you.
Thanks, Jeff. Do we have a summary slide after this one that you could?
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Great. Well, I just wanted to summarize, take a moment to summarize today's webinar. We've covered a lot of information in a very short period of time this afternoon, and we really appreciate your attention and your interest. We've touched on a number of things, including the importance of physical activity for persons with disabilities, the new ADA regulations. We've explored the many ways fitness centers and facilities can be made accessible, including adding adapted fitness equipment, as well as applying the new ADA regulations. We hope this information has been useful and that it will give you a good starting point for welcoming people with disabilities into your programs and facilities. For each of the topics covered today, there are a number of resources available, as we've mentioned throughout the webinar, and they will be available in your handouts. And you'll be receiving the handout following completing the webinar survey. And the handout also contains information that we didn't have time to cover today. And I just wanted to mention that as you review the packet of materials and sort of digest the information you've been given, please don't hesitate to contact Jeff or to call on me and my colleagues here in the Washington office if you have any questions. We're here to assist you. And as Jeff mentioned, he gave an overview of our brand new website. We're very proud of it. We're very excited about what that's going to be able to provide to you and people in communities across the country who are really championing the importance of including people with disabilities in sport, fitness, recreation, and physical activity. So we hope that you'll take a look at our website, utilize the resources, share the information with others so that they know that it's available. And we also want to encourage you to look for information on future webinars. We'll be doing more webinars throughout the year based on topics that we understand are important to communities who are working on inclusion. And we'll also be providing on the website more information on the training and education resources that are currently under development and that will be posted on our website for your use. And I also just want to, BlazeSports wants to thank the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services for their support in making this webinar possible. And now I'll hand it back over to Jeff for any questions that may have come up during the webinar.
Okay, thank you, Ann. We do have a few questions. Again, a reminder that the survey will be sent to you. When you see a little prompt that says webinar is ended, please click on that and do that, and we'll send out the survey and PDF to you this afternoon. Again, anyone doing CUs must do that, okay? And we're going to go on to questions, and we're going to leave our contact information up there just while we're doing questions. And first question is there adaptations for these to be able to have for the shorter individuals? This is one of our biggest issues for our group.
I would say that the the equipment that you were showing, Jeff, particularly the ergometers and the weight equipment, certainly because of the swing away or the removable chairs or seats, would allow a person who who is of short stature to use the equipment better, particularly the equipment that swivels down or can be brought down to a low position. But you may have some other thoughts on that too. But I would think the equipment that you highlighted certainly takes into consideration people of short stature.
Okay. We had a question about recumbent bikes. I'm not sure what specifically, if the person is still there, if you want to retype it. As you said something about these recumbent bikes is what I was asking about, the bikes. So I'm not sure what that means, but if you could get that back to us. We have one question. Given limited budgets in our program, if you were to recommend one particular piece of equipment over another, what would it be? I think I'll take that. Again, based on, I would endorse, well, two things that I would recommend would be the primary things. Ergometers, a really good ergometer for a fitness center is, I think, is essential, because it is a user-friendly piece of equipment, not only for people with disabilities, but also for seniors who might need it, for seniors that coming off a knee or hip replacement and can't use a treadmill or a recumbent bike or a standard bike. Ergometers provide that opportunity for them to get a cardiovascular workout. The weekend warrior who blows out his knee playing football or sprains an ankle running, hits a curb and sprains an ankle. Again, the upper extremity ergometer provides that opportunity for them to keep their cardiovascular workout going, and then in turn it provides an opportunity for people with disabilities, especially people using wheelchairs, to get a cardiovascular workout as well. And cardiovascular workout in terms of burning carbos and getting dealing with the obesity issue that we're dealing with is our primary thing. Go ahead, Dan.
And then I would just add, that's a great one. I would just add, because they're a lot less expensive, if you could just budget in some of the accessories that you went over that allow people to grip and use, you know, the typical weight machines and equipment that are available.
Yes, absolutely. Again, those the accessories that we talked about are, you're talking about less than $100 to do that in a program that uses it regularly. It's not a real big thing. It came back with a question: recumbent bikes, do they have an adaptive seat for the shorter individuals under 5 foot tall? That is, again, depending on the person. Most recumbent bikes do have a seat that adjusts. So it does go forward and then also goes back for people that were longer lengths. So yes, like a standard upright bike that the seat ranges, you can adjust the seat to be high or low to fit leg length. Recumbent bikes do have the seat that comes forward and moves back based on leg length. So yes, somebody with short stature would be able to use a recumbent bike. Again, obviously, we would suggest that you check out different manufacturers to make sure that you're getting the one that is best suits your population. The question here I have is, can you let everyone know about the crank, which is an upper body ergometer similar to a spin bike? Yes, I can, because I guess I just did, but I'm not sure if the crank is a particular piece of equipment.
Yeah, it is. It's a name brand piece of equipment. It's actually designed by the person who designed the spin cycle. And I don't know if I'm calling it the right thing, but anyway, it's being used in a lot of gyms across the country in spin classes. And some people are actually, you know, using that. It's designed so that a person with a disability and a person without a disability can use it. But it's more high-end, again, used in spin classes and those types of things. But those of us who've used ergometers, you know, for upper body ergometers for training and aerobic fitness for decades, we're really excited to see this piece of equipment come on to the market. Okay. Well,
we had a second follow-up. Have you heard about crank cycles, and what's your opinion? And yes, we've heard of them, and we just gave our opinion. So, yeah, apparently it's a brand new piece of equipment out there that provides an opportunity for folks to be involved in spin classes. So it sounds pretty exciting. With regards to new ADA regulations, if new construction projects began after the new guidelines were released, but will be completed before the guidelines are enforced, which code enforcement takes consideration?
I'm actually going to recommend that the person who asked that question call the ADA, call the Department of Justice ADA hotline to talk specifically through their situation, because I can't, you know, it's just not possible for me to advise them on that and make sure that it's right. So call the Department of Justice ADA hotline and talk them through it to be sure you're getting the right information, because it's a little bit complicated in terms of those deadlines and which specifications you're supposed to use. Thanks.
Very good. And again, if you have questions after the fact, and difficulty researching that, please give our Washington office a call, and they'll assist you through that process. I guess we have a crank cycle enthusiast out there that has commented that the seat comes off and it is accessible and has many adjustments. So I even learned something today, and I will research the crank and add it to our presentation.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
We got another comment. Crank cycles are fun and can be used by able-bodied and disabled users and can make spin classes accessible. So apparently we missed the boat on the crank cycles, and we'll include them in the future. That is for sure. One more here. What do existing facilities have to do by next year? All?
Existing facilities, when you do a modification or new construction, you'll have to bring your facility up to the 2010 standards.
Okay. That is our questions for today. We still have a bunch of folks online. If you come up with a question, we have a question portion of the survey, which you can add additional information. So if you come up with something, please do that. I know that we have a number of college classes involved. If you can make sure that you do a survey for at least the class and list the number of people that attended. It's very exciting to know that we have colleges across the country that are participating in this webinar. Again, if you have any additional questions, please put it there. If those not answered, we will follow up with individually. And on behalf of BlazeSports America and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, I thank you for joining us today, and I hope you get a lot out of our webinar. Our handouts will be out in a couple hours to you, and we appreciate you being with us today. I want to thank Ann, my coworker, and Stephanie Joyce for joining us. I appreciate your input today, and we look forward to having a future webinar not too far down the road. Thank you.
Thank you.